Translation is not about changing words, it's about carrying emotion from one soul to another. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode because joining me is Mohini Gupta from Oxford, a writer, translator, and scholar whose work beautifully explores language, identity, and what it means to be a woman finding her own rhythm. Thank you so much, Mohini, for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You've spoken and written so thoughtfully about creativity and self expression, and I'd love to start by asking, have you ever felt that perfectionism has stopped you from starting something your heart deeply wanted?
Thank you so much, Aprajita, and thank you for having me here. I'm really, really excited to be on this podcast. And I really enjoy speaking to you as well. So this is a great way to do it. And thank you for that it's a very deep first question to jump into the conversation from. But I think perfectionism is something I've struggled with a lot and I've thought about a lot. And it's something that I've learned to let go of over the years. I think I used to be much more of a perfectionist before than I am now, and maybe I'll explain that in a little bit. Um, has it ever stopped me from starting something? Many times. Many times, you're kind of, if you're writing something, you're staring at a blank screen and you feel like whatever you're going to write is not going to be good enough. So there's no point starting. But I think that's the idea that I've had to let go of. Like, I think I learned this um, even more intensely during my PhD. So the last 4 years, I was in a PhD program, which I just finished last year. And I think the only way I've gotten to the other side of it is by telling myself that it doesn't need to be perfect. And I think I used to think that my PhD will be the best thing I ever write. It'll be my magnum opus. It'll be my, masterpiece, and nothing will ever top that. But over the 4 years, I realized, no, I just need a finished PhD, and that's what is evidence of a good scholar. It's a completed thesis as opposed to like the best and the most perfect thesis. And I also saw, my friends around me who are also perfectionists really struggling with moving forward because yeah, you just put so much pressure on yourself. But really, I've learned to kind of just keep going from one thing to another because if you keep thinking about that final product and if you keep obsessing over it being perfect, you just can't move forward from the first step. So that's really been my journey with it, where I've learned, and I think the PhD was the biggest example for me, just learning to let go of it and kind of prioritizing moving forward, just constantly moving forward as opposed to allowing yourself to get stuck.
So, do you see perfectionism as a strength or a cage, especially in a sphere like academia?
I think perfectionism itself is a very abstract concept to define. But like I said, I think I used to see it as a strength, and I think it has held me in good stead also. I think I do hold very high standards for um, you know, whether if you talk about creativity or academics, whatever I write, whatever I even read, I do hold very high standards for it. When I'm translating, for instance, I do kind of think a lot about something being perfect, or like I work a lot with poetry and rhyme, so I go back and forth a lot. Things take a lot of time because you want to get that perfect rhythm, you want to get that perfect meter, sound. So when you're focusing on music and sound and rhythm, perfection does come in to that quite a bit. And I definitely think that there is some merit in seeing it as a strength, but um, it's also both. And that's what I've realized as well. I have seen my friends who treat it as a cage, who've really struggled to get anywhere because they're just not able to move past that. So I've also learned to let myself out of that cage a little bit. I think I have seen my own project sometimes completely not go through because I've kept such a high standard that I couldn't move forward. But I think I'm learning to have a more healthy relationship with that perfectionism where I'll still bring it if I'm editing something or if I'm writing something, I will still hold myself to a very high standard. But I think perfectionism is an ideal. It is an idealistic thing and it is abstract in that sense. And it's also never ending. So there's no end to how much better something can be. And, if I write something tomorrow, I'm sure if I think about it for another year and write it next year, I'm sure it'll be better. There's no doubt about that. But then do I want to wait till next year? Do I want to just like, you know, put out what I'm thinking right now and have it written there, or do I want to just, push it forward? So I think it's a tussle, and it's a constant tussle. I wouldn't say to let go of that perfectionism because it does push you to be better. But I think if it keeps you stuck at a certain stage and it doesn't allow you to move forward, I think that's when you start recognizing it as a cage and trying to move out of that. Yeah.
So, since we've talked about idealistic concepts, there's also a cultural script that runs society, which specifies women as species who run out of time, whether it's for career, marriage, children, or even dreams. So, have you ever felt that pressure in your life?
Yes, I have thought about this a lot. Luckily, a lot of women of my age, I've seen them face and buckle under pressure, especially in like their social life when it's things like marriage and children and things like that. I have seen a lot of women give into that. Luckily, I have not had that pressure, say, from my immediate family. So, I was never forced, or well, forced is maybe a wrong word, but even um, emotionally blackmailed or pushed into, getting married at a certain age. I think I really owe my parents that. I have to give them that credit that they never ever made me feel that, okay, I am a woman and I have a certain timeline and I have to stick to that timeline. I think they've always somewhere pushed me to, think for my own self what I want. I know that a lot of people don't have that privilege. So I'm very conscious of that. But there is a sense, and when it comes to children, for instance, there are a lot of biological arguments that people come up with and try to push you to sort of plan your life in a certain way. I think there are ways out of that. I think, with sort of advancing medicine and procedures, there are ways in which you can delay that process also. So many women I know now are freezing their eggs, for example, to be able to push that process forward. So I think things are changing. I think it's becoming possible to push forward the timeline a little bit. I think it does depend on your support system around you. It depends on, the people that you collect. The people, of course, there are some that you collect, there are some that you're given in life, with family and things like that. But I think it does take having a lot of hard conversations, pushing back, and really knowing what you want to do. I think giving in to something is a very unhealthy way of moving forward, whether it's in your career or your social decisions, falling under that pressure. It is very difficult for women to not fall under that pressure either, because there is a certain patriarchal system that we are all growing up in. And, whatever you say, even if it's a very cosmopolitan place like New Delhi, where I've grown up, there are a lot of patriarchal things that you constantly have to struggle with. I used to work for a women's program for 6 years in Delhi. I'm still associated with them, the Vedika Scholars Program for Women. And we think about this a lot, and we talked about this a lot about what can really equip women to be able to deal with that pressure at the right time, because that's what happens at a certain age. You drop off the career track at a certain age. You start making decisions for other reasons. But I think if you have people who are sort of in your support group, in your network, who are able to show you, a different side of things, who are able to push you to think about who you really are authentically. I think that's something that can help you kind of move out of that cultural script, because yeah, it is, society is constantly pressuring you for things, and it's very, very difficult to face those kind of taunts or judgments, or just questions, interrogations from people around you. It is very difficult to face that, but I think it is also possible to find your tribe in a sense, and be able to support each other to really look into what you want to do. I think there's no judgment. I think that's another thing that I have grown out of. I think when I was younger, say 10 years ago, I would judge people who would make certain choices, whether it's early marriage or, having children early and things like that. But that's also something I've moved out of, because I think everyone does have the right and independence to make their own script. I think if it's something that they wanted to do, it's perfectly okay. But it's not okay for them to push it on others. It's not okay for other people to then tell you what to do based on, how other people make their decisions. So yeah, I think everyone should have that independence to sort of be who they authentically are and then decide what they want to do. So this running out of time narrative is something that is a very stressful thing to deal with as a woman. But as long as you know there are options, as long as you know that you can reach out to people around you for the right advice, I think that's a really important thing to have.
So, how do you personally reconcile ambition with the constant TikTok of societal expectations?
I think I've always been a bit of a rebel in that sense. I don't have a personality which makes me look like a rebel because I keep it as a very internal process. But I know that in my own moral compass or in my own kind of way, I have always prioritized my sort of professional life over my personal life, whatever that means. I think again, over the years, I've learned that these two need to be reconciled. Um, uh, so ambition can be reconciled with your, say, emotions or your personal life, not with societal expectations. So that's something that I will never reconcile my ambition with because I do have very strong ambitions. I've always been sort of, I can't say I've always been clear about what that ambition is, but I think it's been clear to me that I will always engage in things that I find interesting. I want to do well in them. I want to excel. I want to succeed in whatever I'm doing. So that's very strong for me. That drive is very strong for me. I'm okay to balance that with, also taking care of myself or giving time to friendships or giving time to my family. I'm okay to do that. But I'm not okay to let that go just because someone thinks I'm going to turn 30 tomorrow and my life should have looked a certain way. In fact, the more I get societal expectations, the more I want to fight against it. So that's how I've like personally responded to it, where somewhere maybe I even took more extreme decisions because I wanted to fight those societal expectations. I wish they weren't there because then I wouldn't have had such a strong reaction to them. But yeah, so that's how I think about it, that I'm okay to reconcile it with my personal life to fulfill myself personally and socially as well, but only because of what is meaningful to me, not because of something that other people want me to do, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, that's why I always call you the Indian Hermione for the rebel and the main character
I
syndrome
love
ever
that
since you were a
comparison.
child. Not to forget the main character syndrome as a child, where you sent, I think Vikram said a translation of his poetry, right? So this brings me to
Yes.
ask you a question about coming into
Yeah.
terms with respect to understanding of yourself. So how has translation is both literal and metaphorical because you work across identities. So how has translation shaped your understanding of yourself?
Translation has been a very, very special part of my life. I think I've shared this story with you before, but I started it for some reason. Actually, consciously, I started it when I was 15. But I recently found an old notebook of mine of when I was 4 years old, and apparently I was writing poetry and translating it. I mean, it was a four-line poem about school teachers and school bells ringing. And I realized that I first wrote it in English and then I translated my own poem in Hindi. So I don't know how this happened, to be very honest. I don't know how translation became such an integral part of my life and my growing up. But this thing with languages has always been something I've been thinking very deeply about and something that has played a big role in my life. Until I was 15, I couldn't speak to my parents in English. So I used to think that speaking English in front of my parents is rude. I don't know where I got this idea, but I would only speak in Hindi. And in school, I was like excelling in English, going for debates and poetry recitations. At home, my parents didn't even know I could speak the language. And at 15, somehow I completely switched and now we actually mostly speak in English and not so much in Hindi. But somewhere like these thoughts around languages and language ideologies have always been like playing on my mind, I think. And what happened is that after school, I went on to studying English literature at LSR. So I did a course in English literature. And when we were studying literature, there's really like a very strong hierarchy between English and Indian languages. And this gets conveyed, in some of these courses where you feel that literature from the West or literature written in English is somehow superior to the literature written in your own languages. And when I went my master's, I went to London for the first time for a year-long master's program in cultural studies. And when I went for this master's, I was meeting other scholars who were from Europe. First of all, they had studied their own writers or read their own writers in their own languages, whether it was French or German or Italian or Spanish. Also, I was meeting like scholars from, say, Norway. I had a very close friend from Norway. He had read like Premchand and other like Sanskrit scholars in the original languages, whereas I hadn't done that. And I think that really, sorry.
And he was ethnically Norwegian, the guy who
Yes.
read Chand. Okay.
Yeah, he had just studied, he'd done some kind of an India studies or South Asian studies program in Oslo. He was very interested in India. And when I was talking to him, we were discussing Premchand, and I realized at some point that I've actually read Premchand in English and he has read him in Hindi. And this is so embarrassing. I think that for me was a big shock. So it made me like think about my own relationship with my languages, and that's something that's played a big role in my life. So since that day, which was about maybe 12 years ago now, since that day, I've been doing a lot to read more in a language that I call my mother tongue, which is Hindi. I've been trying to engage, more with literature in Hindi. My own translation work is from English to Hindi. You talked about Vikram Seth. I've just finished translating. Well, I finished translating this book many years ago, but it's just coming out this year. A translation of his poetry collection called Beastly Tales, which are 10 long animal fables that he's written in English. I've translated them to Hindi. And for me, it's just so much fun to sort of improve my own relationship with my language. But at the same time, what I'm trying to do is also make this poetry that I'm writing in Hindi, this translation that I'm doing, I'm also making it interesting for other young readers because I want young people to think that it is cool and fun to read your own language. I feel like when we're introduced to our own languages in school through like Hindi textbooks, for instance, the chapters are very sort of preachy or kind of moralistic or very patriotic. And I feel like not enough is done to make languages interesting for us at that age. And I think it is that age where we form our ideas about language. We start feeling ashamed of speaking a certain language, or we get ashamed of an accent that we have when we speak English. There are so many things that, we inherit at that age. And through my translation work, what I really would like to do and my ultimate goal is to make young readers of the language feel that, okay, this is also a language that I can have fun with. It's something that I can enjoy reading. And I think it's been a journey for me. And through my translation work, I would like to push other young people on that journey as well.
I mean, I agree with you. When it comes to language, as a country, we're doing a very terrible job. You ask an engineer to solve a quadratic equation, we'll be able to give it to you. But when you ask us to draft a formal email, we'll have to succumb to the wounds of ChatGPT. And 98% of Indians are under the false impression of the idea that Hindi is the national language of India. So I agree with you on the language part. So coming on to the next question, as the national language of India part offended you.
No, no, I was going to say I have so many thoughts on that. That's so true. And it's something that I talk about so much because it's such a misconception. And this whole language debate is actually, it's become uglier than it needs to be. And it's being dealt with in not a very great way. So yeah, there's a lot of thinking and work that needs to be done on that front where, um, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about this. So maybe I won't about this topic. If we have time later on, we can come back to it.
Definitely, Mohini. So, coming on to the next question. As women, we all connect through shared experiences. So, what's one silent battle you think most women fight, but they rarely say it out loud?
This is a really tough one because I think it's very, very difficult to generalize experiences of women. I think it would be so difficult for me as, a fairly privileged woman, upper caste from Delhi. I think it would be very difficult for me to try to generalize something that most, women are fighting. But if we think of silent battles, I mean, I think we're all fighting a lot of battles with ourselves. I think, of course, there are multiple battles we fight with people outside. And, I would love to say patriarchy because I think maybe that's the not so silent battle that we're all fighting. But I think being able to find our authentic selves. So I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on, is to just, yeah, that fight to be able to figure out or find out who you really are and what you really want, and not because somebody else is telling you this, or because you're either reacting by being a rebel, or you're subscribing to something somebody else wants to do. But I think we're not able to get that space to really explore what we really want. I think that I would think is something that most people end up struggling with, because you end up reacting to circumstances around you and then you become a certain way, maybe. But it would be really nice to just have that space, or a safe space, um, yeah, to find out who you authentically are and what you really do want from life, and how to make those choices then based on that.
So, from all the discussions we've had as of now, I do have an impression of you being such an authentic, ambitious person ever since inception. So, what's one advice you could give to the 15-year-old Mohini who started off with translation, who thought life would have to be a straight line?
I don't see myself inherently as an authentic or ambitious person either. But I think I do want to say, though, that at 18, I don't think I thought life was going to be a straight line. And I think that's something I mean, of course, at this point, I definitely don't think so. But even at that point, I never really made like long plans. Like I didn't, and sometimes I used to feel bad about that. I think what I would tell the 18-year-old me would be not to feel bad about that, because I was made to feel bad about the multiple interests I had, or I'm very enthusiastic about things. So I like to involve myself in many different things, whether it's music. I used to sing, I used to play the piano. I was also doing like translation work. Of course, I was, also going into academia and very interested in that. I was doing like many, many things. And I did have a lot of interests. And I remember I went for a job interview when I was 22, and the person looked at my CV and said, "This is so all over the place. What is the one thing that you want to do? Because I don't understand from your CV who you really are or what you really like." And I remember crying so much after the interview, because this was a person, he was a very senior person in the arts world. And, I was quite impressionable then. I didn't know what was in store for me. So I felt really bad about myself, and he was very rude as well. So I thought, okay, maybe there's something wrong with me, that I don't want to do that one thing, or I don't have like a single long-term life plan. So I would really like to tell my 18-year-old self, that it's okay. It's actually going to turn out great for you if you just really keep listening to what you like and what you want, and keep taking those decisions that way. Don't be just don't be derailed by other people who think they know better, but they don't always know better. So yeah, I think that's the advice I would go for.
That's a wonderful answer, Mohini. So, moving on to the next question. If you could bottle one emotion from your life and give it to every woman, what would it be?
I think this one is very clear to me. I'm still struggling with what to name that emotion, but I have always had this feeling very strongly that if I am looking at someone's life, for instance, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're having such a great time. I wish I could be more like them, or I wish my life could be more like this person's life. I think very early on, I told myself that things always balance out somewhere. And, if there's something good about this other person, I'm sure I have something that they would want as well. So there's always something or the other, that kind of in the long run balances out. And I think what that has led to is a feeling of contentment. I think I've somewhere always felt content with what I have, and not thought, okay, that this emotion of envy, I think it's a very, very unhelpful emotion, to feel envy about someone else's life, and to feel that you and social media, I mean, it really it leads to that in very unhealthy ways, I think, because you're only seeing the best parts of someone's life, but everyone is going through very difficult struggles, and we don't see those very easily. So it's very easy to think, oh my God, why, it's so unfair. Why can't I look like that? Or why can't I succeed like this person? Or why am I not more like them? Or why do they have this perfect relationship? Why am I not able to find anyone? So it's very normal to feel these things, but I think that's something that I've always had, this feeling of contentment, which I really wish I could give to everyone that I could, where they could just feel like, okay, I have what I have, and other people, it may seem great, but I'm sure they also don't have something and want something that I might have. So, yeah, I think there's some kind of balance that always works out at the end, and I would like everyone to know that.
So, what part of your story do you think your future self will look back on with the most compassion?
I think it's similar to the answer that I was talking about, where the part where I have these multiple interests, and I sometimes also like to do more than I can manage. I'm still doing that actually. I haven't changed in that sense. I get very excited by new things. I like to learn new languages. I like to if there's something interesting coming up, I just want to be able to take part in that. And what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on myself. So I end up taking on many more things than I can manage. I end up making myself busier than anyone needs to be. So I think that that's something that I've struggled with a little bit, but maybe like even now when I'm looking back at it, I'm thinking, okay, that was a part of you, and it's okay. So maybe I want to have a little more compassion for that part of me, which really does approach everything with enthusiasm and excitement, and I want to retain that part of me.
That's a very wonderful answer, Mohini, which brings us to the end of the podcast with one last question from your side. Do you think women today are finally allowed to rest, or are we still carrying the weight of doing it all?
Another very tough one to end with. Unfortunately, I don't think I can say we're at a point where women are finally allowed to rest. I think we have come a long way in this sort of approach to gender, and I think things are changing. There's something that's shifting on that front, where women are being recognized as better leaders in places, or people are seeing the amount of work that goes into, say, home building for women. I mean, there's so many conversations that are shifting around gender. So I do see that change happening, especially in, say, the last 10 to 15 years. But I think there's a long way to go. I Like I was saying, a lot of my decisions I can see have come from rebelling against a lot of these norms or stereotypes that are placed on women. So even though I keep saying that I come from privilege, but I do want to acknowledge that. So even though I've had a lot of privileges along the way, I think at the same time I have carried that weight of, proving myself constantly, doing it all, being able to achieve whatever I want, succeed in everything. Also, manage my personal relationships, give all my time to family, be able to sort of juggle everything. So I think it'll take a long time for women to not face that pressure. But I do see some positive changes on that front as well. So I can only hope that we'll keep going down that path more and more in the future as well.
Thank you so much, Mohini, for joining us today. It was a very incredible conversation with you, and you're one of those women I really like speaking to. And I had been looking forward to this podcast since a very long time. So, one thing that I've learned from you is that women in time to come will definitely do much. And I see you as a woman in academia and linguistics flourish more in your future. So, thank you so much, Mohini. And this is Girlhood Collective signing
You're
off.
very kind. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed thinking about these questions as well. So thank you.
Thank you.